Backed into a corner by his own hypocrisy, double standards and rule-breaking, Keir Starmer tried to claim back the moral high ground over Beargate today, but spectacularly failed.
We all found the rules frustrating at times, and I'm no exception to that. I had to isolate 6 times during COVID, pulling me away from my work and the things that I love. But I did it because we followed the rules. The idea that I would then casually break those rules is wrong. I'm absolutely clear that no laws were broken. They were followed at all times. I simply had something to eat while working late in the evening, as any politician would do days before an election. But if the police decide to issue me with a fixed penalty notice, I would, of course, do the right thing and step down.
Big problem with that. Starmer knows there is virtually no chance of Durham Police issuing him a fine. They have a policy, an official policy, not to hand out retrospective fixed penalty notices for lockdown breaches. Even Dominic Cummings didn't receive one for his obvious rule-breaking flight of fancy to Barnard Castle. So the key question is, will Starmer resign if the police find he breached the lockdown rules, which, based on the evidence, I am utterly convinced that he did? Well, when asked that question today, slippery Starmer, of course, refused to commit.
Given what you've said about the Prime Minister, you'd have no option but to resign. So my first question is, why did it take you so long to arrive at that position?
No rules were broken. I've been absolutely clear about that from start to finish. And I've set out today the in-principle position that I believe in. Unlike those at Downing Street, I don't think those that make the laws can then simply breach them and not take action. I believe that if you've made a law, you should respect the law, and if you're found to be in breach of it, you should step down. And that's what I've set out clearly this afternoon.
OK, so let me follow this. He'll stay as leader even if he is found in breach of the laws, exactly what he's attacked Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak for. Indeed, if Starmer were to follow his own standards for the Prime Minister, he should have resigned on Friday afternoon, the moment Durham Police announced its investigation. That's because on the 31st of January, before Boris had even been issued with a thing, Starmer vented on Twitter. Honesty and decency matter. After months of denials, the Prime Minister is now under criminal investigations for breaking his own lockdown laws. He needs to do the decent thing and resign. Well, if honesty and decency mattered, as Starmer suggested in that tweet, he would have already admitted wrongdoing. The Labour Party's tissues of lies over beers with Keir has collapsed over the past 2 weeks. A bombshell memo released by the Mail on Sunday yesterday proved the curry night was pre-planned, in stark contrast to Starmer's claim he simply stopped for a bite to eat. The Labour Party had already been forced to admit it lied over the attendance of the party's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, at the gathering, who today also confirmed she will quit if issued with a fixed penalty notice. Attendees at the event have poured scorn on Starmer's public claims they went back to work after the curry and beer party, with Politico reporting today that many there were drunk and obviously not working. Starmer also claimed publicly the curry night was needed because the restaurants and pubs were closed in Durham that night, when that's provably untrue. Many were open, but you had to eat outside. Heaping further shame on Starmer, the former Director of Public Prosecutions, of course, is the unenvious position he's now put the Durham Police. Here's what one of the country's top barristers, Francis Hoare, told my colleague Colin Brazier this evening.
The important thing here is that Sir Keir Starmer has firstly undermined the important principle that the police do not decide whether or not somebody is innocent or guilty, and secondly the presumption of innocence. He's undermined that, in my view, by saying what he did, indicating that he would agree to whatever the police decide, and thirdly, he has put deeply inappropriate pressure on the Durham Constabulary by saying that he will resign depending upon what they decide. None of these are appropriate for a leader of the opposition, and they're particularly inexcusable for the ex-DPP.
By the way, don't give Starmer any credit for facing the media today. GBNews, which has been on this story since the start, was banned from today's press briefing, as was every national newspaper, including the Daily Mail, which put the story on its front page for 7 days in a row last week. And look at this bizarre moment, truly bizarre, when Starmer started to take questions from the 3 hand-picked journalists allowed into the room by the Labour Party, ITV's Libby Weiner, the BBC's Ben Wright and Sky News political editor Beth Rigby.
I'll now take questions. I think, Beth, we've agreed you'll go first.
Yes, thank you.
So we're now in Joe Biden territory, folks, where friendly journalists are pre-selected to ask a question of Starmer. What a disgrace. And shame on those 3 news organisations that allowed for such a corrupt setup. But of course we shouldn't be at all surprised. The BBC, ITV News and Sky News were obsessed with the Partygate story. Obsessed. They covered it breathlessly for months on end because they thought it could bring down Boris Johnson. But they have absolutely zero interest in pursuing original journalism on Beargate because they're in the tank for Starmer, who, let's be honest, is one of them. A Brexit-hating member of the London Liberal metropolitan elite. I don't think anyone should have to resign for breaking the COVID rules, which were totally moral, completely inhumane. I was proud to break them. But I am asking for consistency when it comes to the coverage of these 2 scandals. Beargate has not only exposed Keir Starmer as a dishonourable hypocrite, it's exposed the deeply ingrained bias of the British broadcast media.